Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 essential symphonic dance works for beginners. I mean, it's a strange category, right? But one of you asked for it, and it was fun to do. And what is like a symphonic dance work anyway? Well, it's sort of hard to define, as you'll see from the list. But essentially what we're talking about is a dance-like piece, something that has rhythm as a primary component, which is what dance music does, but which is arranged in such a way so as to afford some larger scale form or developmental aspect, which we call symphonic. I mean, if it's for an orchestra and it isn't in simple ABA form or, lasts longer than 2 minutes, we likely call it symphonic in some way. And so that's what these pieces are. But there's some really great music here. Amazing music. And so I do hope you'll give a chance, take the opportunity, thank you, to listen to some of these pieces that you may not know that well, because they are splendid. They're just really fascinating. And the idea of symphonic dances has really been actually a very compelling one. A lot of composers have taken up the challenge, and masterpieces have resulted. Number one, the first, which is the iconic one, it sort of got the whole conversation started, is Rachmaninoff's Symphonic Dances. This was the last big orchestral work that Rachmaninoff wrote. And it's a masterpiece. It's fantastic. It shows him moving in new directions toward a harder edged, more glittering sonority, but still the Rachmaninoff we know and love. The Russian gloom, gorgeous melodies, dark dies irae, that guy. It's all there. And it even refers back to his first symphony. And his very first symphony, which he thought it was lost. Which he thought he destroyed and only reappeared after his death. So it's a wonderful summing up, but it's also a dance piece. Not so much the first movement. The last movement is very rhythmically skittish, but the central movement, oh my goodness, it's this spooky, brooding waltz that's just unbelievably gorgeous and sexy and decadent and fantastic. So that's a work that you should really know, and we've talked about it, like I said before. So that is the piece that is sort of the iconic symphonic dance work. All the rest of these are less familiar in one way or another. Next, Grieg. Grieg wrote a lovely work called Symphonic Dances, and one of the things that symphonic things tend to have is like 4 movements, like a symphony, and this does. And it's also a terribly underplayed piece of music, because nobody ever feels that Grieg was able to write in larger forms. But he was. Those forms were often not conventional. And the piano concerto was, the violin sonatas and string quartet, those are normal. But the Symphonic Dances is a big symphonic work that uses the rhythms of Norwegian folk dance and melody, and it's absolutely lovely, and most people don't know it at all, which I think is kind of astonishing because it's terrific. After that, Kodály, Zoltán Kodály, he of Hari János fame. He did 2 sets of dances. The more symphonic of the 2 is the Dances of Galánta. Now, these dance-type pieces are symphonic in as much as he takes a sequence of these dances and welds them together in a large single-movement form. And this lasts something like 15 minutes. It's a big single-movement form based on dances, and it doesn't hang together unless there's something that makes the whole thing work. And what that something is can be motives or rhythms or, melodic or whatever, or even, timbral. But it's a brilliant and fabulous symphonic exposition of dances from the Galánta region of Hungary. And, it used to be like a firework, like an orchestral showpiece. And for some reason, people don't play it anymore. Or not that I've noticed, and I can't understand why, because it's absolutely lovely. And if you haven't heard it in a while, take it out and give it a listen. You'll be really happy you did. It's exciting. Oh, and by the way, I have to say this. A lot of you have said with these lists and other things where we talk about music, it would be nice if I had recording recommendations next to each thing. Now, I do talks about recordings, and I do talks about works. And sometimes I'll make a recording recommendation when I give a talk about a work generally, and sometimes I won't. But the idea is to turn you loose to find your own way with these pieces, because first of all, it's healthy. It's healthy as a beginner, particularly, to learn who the performers are and what the options are and how to find things. Because in classical music, you're going to have to do that. And so much is available on streaming platforms now that it's almost pointless, because you never know what's available and what isn't. But there's a lot of stuff. But the other thing is, I have an entire, remember this? Classics, there is this, classicstoday.com. I have an entire website devoted to recording recommendations. It has literally, and I mean it, tens of thousands of reviews. Most of them are free reviews. Then we have a subscriber section that allows you to hear, works with sound clips and, other things in a more focused kind of way. But the vast majority of reviews at classicstoday.com are free reviews and are easily searchable by composer. So if you want to know which versions to get, just hie on over to classicstoday.com, type in the composer's name, and run a search. I mean, it's that simple. And, if you have a problem with the search thing, I'll help you, tell me, but seriously, it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And so I don't feel any need to repeat myself. I really don't. I think you can get wonderful advice and also get a lot of experience, again, learning who the performers are, who the labels are, what the music sounds like by reading reviews. It's just a healthy way to go about acquiring music and learning at the same time, which is what you're doing watching these videos. So it's an enhanced feature, I feel, of these videos. Go to classicstoday.com and have a good time. Find some performances that are recommended. Anyway, after Kodály, Hindemith, German, grim Hindemith, very serious German guy from the first half of the 20th century, basically, the great German composer of that era, some would say, at least who did not go into the atonal serial ghetto. And he wrote a wonderful work that nobody knows called Symphonic Dances. Now, being German, his concept of dancing is a little clunky, somewhat. But oh my goodness, what a lovely piece it is. It's beautiful. And the finale is really heroic. It sounds like a superhero movie soundtrack. It has this da-da-da-dum, ba-ba, da-ba-da-dum, bum-ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Oh, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Why don't you know it? Go listen to Hindemith's Symphonic Dances. You're going to be so pleasantly surprised. It's a beautiful work. Forget the dance part so much. Okay. It's not light on its feet. Let's put it that way. But who cares? And again, it's a 4-movement symphonic thing. It's just great. After Hindemith, Leonard Bernstein, the Symphonic Dances from West Side Story. Incredibly, incredibly popular. What is symphonic about this stuff? Well, it consists of dance numbers from throughout the entire musical. And they're all unified by a very simple motive. The motive of the song Somewhere. Da-da, da-da, that thing, da-da, that little motive, that runs through them in many different ways. And do-do-do, bo-do-do. Remember that? The opening of the whole thing? It has recurring themes that bind the whole work together. And it's a wonderful suite, first of all, from West Side Story, and second of all, a terrific 20-minute long, unified, essentially tone poem about the story, about the plot of the musical. And it is genuine dance music quite often. Not all of it, but most of it. And wonderful dance music. Oh my goodness, it's just delicious. One of the things that people don't give Bernstein credit for is his extraordinary melodic elegance. He had a wonderful, wonderful, sophisticated, shapely, winsome way with melody. And he wrote beautiful, beautiful tunes. And a lot of them are in the Symphonic Dances. So go for that, my goodness. Now we have Joaquin Turina, Danzas fantásticas. This is a 3-movement dance suite, fantastic dances, symphonic dances for sure, and absolutely fabulous. The last movement, the Orgia, is the one that people really know. Dum ba da 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 dum ba da ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba dum. That's the one everybody knows. But oh my goodness, they are so beautiful, unbelievably lyrical and tuneful and rhythmic and vigorous and joyous and fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. I mean, if you don't know the Danzas fantásticas, all three of them, you are missing something. I mean, it's a big deal. They're just wonderful, wonderful pieces. After Turina, Bartók. Bartók wrote tons of dance pieces, based on, Hungarian, Romanian, Transylvanian, all the folk music that he collected in his ethnomusicological days. And one of his greatest of all dance pieces is his dance suite. Now, the dance suite is more symphonic than most symphonic dances because Bartók was always extremely formally structured. I mean, everything he wrote has a shapeliness of form. And this dance suite, it's a suite, but it's in one movement. It's a suite because the separate dances are united by a ritornello. A ritornello is simply a tune that returns. Between each section, you hear the tune. Da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum. It's a simple little tune, and it comes in between each section. And between each section, you get one of the dance numbers. And so it's a very nicely unified piece, and it moves from sort of galumphy, funny, folky things to a wild finale. Now, authentic Hungarian folk music, which is what Bartók was always using, is actually quite adventurous harmonically and different. And so you'll hear pieces, bits of this thing. Some of them are very melodic and sort of traditional and like folksy sounding, and others sound like, that's unusual, because genuine folk music is it's not always tonal, it's not always, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting, and the dance suite has both. It's a wonderful work, absolutely wonderful, also about 20 minutes long. After Bartók, the Finnish composer Kalevi Aho, he did a terrific piece of symphonic dances. They're called Symphonic Dances. There's only one recording. It's on the BIS label. Aho is a fine contemporary Finnish composer. I think he's a little bit excessively prolific, personally. So his output is a little spotty. And, he writes concertos for, contrabassoon and tuba and, does things that, are sort of, I find them a little gimmicky sometimes. But he's a really, really sensitive guy. And when he's on form, which is really most of the time, he's a first-class composer. And the Symphonic Dances are delightful. They are written in memory of Uno Klami, who was another Finnish conductor who died with a ballet called Whirls that Aho completed. And so these are sort of a knockoff from that. And Klami was a wonderful composer. We've talked about him, and I've done some videos. You might want to take a look. His name is spelled Klami, Uno Klami. Yeah. And he really wrote terrific stuff as well. So Aho is in that tradition. He's in his Klami phase. And you really should hear his symphonic dances. They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. After that, we have Jan Novák, the Czech composer, who is sort of the logical successor to Bohuslav Martinu. He wound up going into exile, and after the 1968 revolution and Russian invasion of Prague, he was a wonderful composer. He wrote just enlivening, vigorous, somewhat neoclassical, brilliant music. He was also a Latin scholar, and he was kind of a fascinating person. But he wrote a piece called Philharmonic Dances, which is a coupling on the new recording of Martinu's Bouquet of Flowers on Supraphon. And Novák, there are a bunch of Nováks. There's Vítězslav Novák, who's a different composer, and Jan Novák, who's the later 20th century composer. And then there's all the singers and other Nováks. It's a very popular name in Czechoslovakia, or not Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic now, pardon me, the Czech lands, if you want to call it that. But the Philharmonic Dances are just great. And, you can call it symphonic or you can call it philharmonic, just like you can call it a symphony orchestra or a philharmonic orchestra. It's no difference. And what a great piece that is. And finally, one of my all-time favorites, Julian Orbón. Julian Orbón was a Spanish composer who went to Cuba and founded a conservatory there. And like so many Spanish composers, he wrote like 10 pieces of music and then died. I mean, he wrote practically nothing. But what he did write was fabulous. And he wrote a piece called Symphonic Dances. And it's amazing. It's recorded on, well, it was originally recorded on Dorian by Eduardo Mata with the Orquesta Sinfónica Simón Bolívar from Venezuela. And those recordings were re-released on Sono Luminous, which brought out Dorian. So you may be able to get it. But there's another recording that's quite good, and it's on Naxos. And it's probably a lot easier to find from Spain. And it also has, his tres versiones. Oh, I'm making a mistake. No, don't let me make a mistake. What Mata recorded was something called tres versiones sinfónicas, 3 symphonic versions. Okay? Ignore that. That's a great work. It's an amazing work. It's on the Naxos disc that I'm talking about, so you'll get it anyway. But the Symphonic Dances is a different work, and it's also on the Naxos disc. So you see, this is what happens when you ad-lib. Sometimes you get a little bit mixed up, and they're actually quite similar, frankly, the two works. His style was, you might want to call it Stravinsky/Copland goes to Spain. And who wouldn't love that? I mean, it's just marvelous. So the Symphonic Dances, which make a fantastic ringtone, are available on Naxos, and that's the only recording of them that you can get. So it made my life and yours just quite a bit simpler after that somewhat confused introduction. So my apologies to Mr. Orbón and to all of you. Yes, it's Julian Orbón, Symphonic Dances on Naxos. Are we clear? So thank you so much for joining me. Go listen to these symphonic dances. You're going to love them. And while you're at it, listen to Orbón's Tres Versiones Sinfónicas. I did a talk about it. It's amazing. Amazing. Great stuff. Great composer. There's so much great music out there. And I hope this list helps you to encounter some more. Take care.